Welcome to North Olympic Library System's Aging Well program for March 2025. Dr. Jessica Panza, a naturopathic doctor based in Port Angeles, is here to provide an overview of the aging immune system and to talk about ways to support your immune system through aging-related challenges. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Panza, and welcome to Aging Well.
Okay, my name is Dr. Panza. I specialize in functional medicine. This is kind of a type of medicine that blends conventional and alternative medicine together, kind of trying to optimize the self-healing capacity of the body with the lowest medical intervention possible. My clinic's mission statement is to provide integrative medicine to improve the health and well-being of the community. And so this class really fits in line with that. So I'm very excited to do this presentation today, and I hope that this material will be helpful. We're going to talk about just the aging immune system and what you can do to support it as you age. And there's going to be a Q&A session at the end. This is also recorded, so you can kind of refer back to it afterwards. We're just going to do a super quick, brief anatomy of the immune system. It doesn't live in one place of the body. It's all over the body. Most of your blood cells, or all of your blood cells, are going to be made in the bone marrow, both the white and the red blood cells. The white blood cells are primarily your immune system cells. Those are going to include B cells, T cells, macrophages, and neutrophils, and these are basically designed to fight infections. Your thymus is kind of a gland that sits in your chest right here. That's where T cells go to mature. Your spleen is kind of constantly filtering the blood for you. The lymphatic system is considered to be part of your immune system. And this is a really interesting part of the body. So blood flows around in arteries and blood vessels. And you have this other channel called the lymphatic system, which is basically like the white juice of the body. And it is where a lot of your immune cells travel through, and it kind of cleans and detoxifies the body. So as you're metabolizing and just your cells are digesting throughout the day, they create a lot of waste that gets excreted, and that lymphatic juice basically comes and picks that stuff out and takes it out of the body. And then you have lymph nodes. Now you have lymph nodes all over your body. Some of the most well-known lymph nodes is the cervical chain kind of right here in your neck. If you guys have raised children, you've probably seen lymph nodes that get really large and swollen in the neck in kids when they get sick. Kids have a really robust immune system, and that's part of what's going on there. But basically what I have equated these to is army base camps. And so when the immune system senses that there's some invading pathogen in the respiratory tract, it will send out a bunch of white blood cells to these lymph nodes in order to get them trained and ready to go out to battle. We talk about kind of two sides to the immune system, the adaptive and the innate. Now, the innate immune system is basically just referring to the stuff that's already there. It didn't have to develop or learn. This is the first line of defense. This is stuff like your skin and immune cells like macrophages. Macrophages are kind of like Pac-Man. They just go around and eat things that shouldn't be there. The other side of the immune system, the adaptive immune system, this is where your immune system learns and grows with time. Now, basically what's happening here is when you get exposed to a pathogen, your immune system is going to create a specialized antibody just specific to that pathogen that it's going to store in its memory banks. Now, these are really involved with B cells. And so basically, if you get exposed to those microbes 5-10 years down the road, your immune system will very quickly be able to deal with it and prevent illness from happening a second time. Some of the key cells that are involved in your immune system are T cells. They attack infected cells, and they can kind of support other immune cells as well. You have B cells. Those are the ones that primarily produce antibodies, and they can also help neutralize pathogens. Macrophages, like I said, those are kind of the Pac-Man that come and eat things that shouldn't be there. Dendritic cells, that's what's pictured here. These are really cool cells. They basically live anywhere near the surface where your body is exposed to the outside world. So primarily that's going to be the skin, the GI tract, and the respiratory tract. And what they do with these like spidery tendrils is they reach out to the outside world and they sort of take a taste of antigens and present it to the immune system so the immune system can decide whether or not it needs to do something about it. What happens as we age in the immune system? Quite a few different things. One of the things that happens is basically your immune system can be a little bit sluggish to mount an immune response to bacteria and viruses, and so it just won't react as quickly as it once did. You also get a decrease in immune cell concentration and volume. And so basically, there's just less soldiers that are available to go to those army camps to get trained to fight infection. And so that can lead to more susceptibility to infection. Vaccines tend to not work as well the more we age. Now, this is primarily why we vaccinate kids. We vaccinate adults too, but we vaccinate kids more heavily. They have really strong immune systems. They will produce those antibodies very quickly. As we age, the vaccines just don't work as well, and they can kind of wear off a little bit sooner also. You kind of have a big change in the modulation of inflammatory responses. And basically, what this means is that um, the inflammatory response can either be too slow to respond, or when it does respond, it can respond too much. This is a really common problem with influenza. This is a leading mortality. It has a high mortality rate in the elderly population every year. Lots of people die from influenza. Oftentimes it's not the infection itself that's actually causing the damage. It's the immune system's response to the virus. So the immune system senses the virus. It starts an inflammatory cascade that's way, way, way too high. And that high level of inflammation can cause some damage to the respiratory tract, to the heart, and to multiple organs. We're actually kind of suspecting that long COVID, I'm sure you guys have heard that word somewhere around, is possibly related to this as well. So the basically the immune system has an exaggerated immune response to the virus, and you get a lot of systemic damage from that long after the infection has been cleared from your system. So we have some changes in the gut microbiome as we age. Now, the gut microbiome, you're going to hear me talk a lot about that today. It's super important for the immune system. The two things that we primarily see what happens as we age is that you get a decrease in diversity, and so you basically don't have as robust of a population in your GI tract, and you kind of get a shift in microbial composition towards more pro-inflammatory species and less of those beneficial species. And this can negatively affect the immune system in a variety of ways. Many of these changes, though, with the gut microbiome can be mitigated by lifestyle factors, and we'll spend some time talking about that today. This is a picture of an NK cell. They're called natural killer cells. These are crucial for identifying and destroying abnormal cells, precancerous cells, virus-infected cells. And what we've seen is that as we age, the activity of them tends to kind of decline, which can increase your risk of getting cancer, which most cancers are diagnosed quite later in life. And the immune system can just become less effective at identifying those precancerous cells. The good news is there's a lot that we can do about this. Many of these changes can be mitigated by work that we can put in. And the analogy that I'm always using for everyone to discuss how to approach health as we age is that, you know, I'm sure you've all experienced when you're a teenager, you can kind of get away with eating fast food all day and still have a six pack and feel fantastic. Not so much in the third, fourth, and fifth decades. And as we continue to age, our health really becomes something that we have to invest in order to maintain. It's not like when we were a teenager where we can do whatever we want and still be healthy. And the other thing is that's important to acknowledge here is that our culture in general is not terribly health promoting. We have lots of marketing and advertising that's just blowing up, you know, terrible food and all sorts of bad health habits in our face all day long. So this does require some swimming against the grain. These are the topics we're going to cover today that can have benefits on your immune system. We're going to talk about sleep, stress, nutrition, the microbiome, movement, some nutrients that you can kind of optimize to support your immune system, handful of different supplements here and there. And then I'm going to give you guys kind of a smoothie recipe at the end, and that can be helpful as well. So some of the things we're going to be talking about today are lifestyle changes. These things are not easy to do. So I just want to acknowledge that up front and just really recommend that if you do decide to embark on any of these changes, that you do something that I recommend my patients all the time. You pick one thing to remove that you know you probably shouldn't be doing. Maybe that's sugar or caffeine or alcohol or screens before bed or whatever it is. And you pick one thing to add that you know you should be doing, eating more fruit or exercising or meditating, whatever it may be. And then you set a timer on your phone for a month. And then in a month, you can kind of evaluate, see how you did and adjust and sort of move on. We're going to be talking about a few supplements today, and I just want to really, just because these things are natural does not mean they're safe. And so I really recommend running any new supplemental protocols by your healthcare provider, especially if you're taking any prescription medications. So we're going to talk about sleep. Sleep is huge for the immune system, and insomnia, so problems with sleeping, become very common as we age. We all kind of know that general feeling that if we're run down, we haven't been sleeping, we're more likely to get the cold and flu that's going around. Um, so poor sleep has been shown to reduce antibody production. So those specialized proteins that the immune system makes to memorize viruses and bacteria that so you don't get infected with them again. You'll actually make less of those if you're not sleeping very well. That lymphatic system that we were talking about, kind of flushing metabolic waste out of your system and delivering immune cells where they need to be, that primarily happens when we're sleeping. So if we are not sleeping, we are not doing that. So you basically kind of bioaccumulate metabolic waste, and the immune cells have a little bit harder time getting to where they need to go. So right next to the word lymphatic is the word glymphatic. So glymphatic is really the same process, but specifically happening in the brain at nighttime. And so when we sleep, you have a similar type of flushing system that's flushing all the waste out of the brain called the glymphatic system. And they've actually been able to document that, well, they're suspecting anyways, that um, part of the risk for dementia is a poorly functioning lymphatic system. So basically, if the lymphatic system is not adequately flushing that brain out of toxins at nighttime, you're going to get an accumulation of toxins, and you're going to end up with an increased risk for dementia. We also see impaired T cell function with lack of sleep, and just in general, increased susceptibility to infection. Now, what do we do about it? Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is good sleep hygiene. This is by landslide the most effective way to improve your sleep. However, it's also hard to do these things. These are not easy things to do. So the analogy that I typically use with people is live like the mountain man did. He gets up with the sun and he goes down with the sun. Now, I don't necessarily mean go to sleep when the sun goes down, because we live here, and last month or the other month, it was 4 o'clock, right? So I'm not saying go to bed at 4 o'clock, but we really do need to be tracking the sun in order to be setting that circadian rhythm, and so our bodies can get good rest at nighttime. So really what you want to focus on doing here is just getting bright light exposure in the AM, and ideally by the sun itself and not by a screen. So I always encourage people that as soon as the sun comes out, do whatever you can for like 10, 15 minutes to just go stand in it. And even on a cloudy day, those rays are still going to come through and trigger that hormonal cascade for you. Exercising daily is also super key to improving sleep. You don't really need to exercise that much to improve sleep. That same 10 to 15 minutes thing can actually be really beneficial. So a lot of times I'll tell people, try to do that 10 to 15 minutes of sunlight exposure on a short walk in the morning, kind of two birds, one stone. Caffeine, coffee. I love coffee. I'm sure many of you do too. Coffee in some individuals can have a really obnoxiously long half-life, up to 9 to 10 hours, which means when you're trying to go to sleep that night, you still have half of that caffeine concentration in your body. So that's a bummer, but it can really be a sleeping problem. So I always tell people limit it to the morning. And then if you're still having sleep problems, you might want to consider doing like a 1 to 2 week experiment where you take coffee out and see if you sleep better. Alcohol, another problem. It will help you fall asleep for most people, but it will not keep you asleep. Alcohol results in a really shallow sleep, so you never really go through those deep sleep cycles that you're supposed to. You're just below wakefulness. So in terms of sleep, it's not helpful. This is a really hard one, right? We're really not supposed to be looking at screens 2 hours before bed. Time and time again, that's been shown in research to really alter that circadian rhythm in a bad way. That's really hard. So this is another one where I oftentimes tell people just do a 2 week experiment where you follow these rules really routinely to see if that affects your sleep. One of the things that I've encouraged people to do is after you're done with dinner, clean up, kind of shut your kitchen down, and then go through your house and turn off any direct lights, right? So the lights that are overhead in your ceiling, those are direct. You can see the light bulb directly, right? That's not the type of light that you want late in the day. So lamps that have shades over them so that you're not directly exposed to the lights. Salt lamps are really good for this. We've actually changed out a couple light bulbs in our main living room area to red light bulbs so we can kind of turn off the white lights and turn on the red lights at nighttime. It's kind of makes the living room look really cool, and it really decreases the amount of light exposure that you're exposed to. They also have night lights that are a red light, or night lights that have a little lampshade in front of them too. So you can kind of use these. We use these, for example, in our bathrooms. It's just enough light to brush your teeth and use the restroom before bedtime. So again, you're just kind of reducing that light exposure as much as you can. This is a great just picture kind of showing the circadian rhythm and how lightness and darkness affect that. Basically, what happens is bright light exposure is going to increase your cortisol levels, which is going to give you a lot of energy through the day and decrease your melatonin production. And then you get the opposite response at nighttime. Being exposed to darkness increases melatonin levels and will decrease cortisol production. The problem is that if you're staring at bright lights, 8, 9 o'clock at night, your hormonal system is getting the message that it's daytime and it's going to flip those hormones on their head, which is going to really affect sleep in a negative way. This is kind of a good chart, just sort of showing that these like oscillations of hormones every day, they kind of have these like big peaks and these big troughs. And as we age, those peaks and those troughs kind of get dampened out. And so I'm just always encouraging people, as we age, we really want to do everything we can to keep those oscillations happening. Because what you really don't want is you don't want a flat line across that graph. You need those peaks, you need those troughs. These are some supplements that really commonly can help with sleep. Magnesium, chelated forms like glycinate can really help. This is a really common micronutrient deficiency. Your more common forms of magnesium, like oxide and citrate, those are laxative supplements. So just make sure that if you're taking it for sleep, that you're actually taking the right form of it, because there's quite a few different forms out there. Ashwagandha, this is an Ayurvedic herbal medicine, kind of helps balance out that cortisol response. It's kind of considered to be an adaptogen, which basically just means it helps your body adapt to stress. L-theanine is the amino acid that's naturally found in green tea, and it has a calming effect. This is actually why green tea, if you've ever drank enough of it, doesn't really give you the jitters the way that coffee will. You can drink a lot of green tea without getting that, and that's because there's L-theanine and they're blocking that kind of excitatory response, and it can be really helpful for sleep. These are a couple of just specific products that a couple of companies make. They're blends of some of these herbal and nutrient recommendations. Bed rest by pure encapsulations, that really is good for helping people fall asleep, whereas cortisol manager is a lot better for those people who wake up around 2 a.m. in the morning. That's a really common clinical problem I see all the time with dysregulated cortisol levels. People will wake up at 2 a.m. plus or minus an hour, and their mind is awake and alert and ready to go, solving all the world's problems or just stressing out about stuff. And then you can't fall back asleep for an hour or two. And that's basically that cortisol hormone spiking in the middle of the night when it shouldn't be. And again, just talking to your doctor before starting any supplement protocols, especially when you're on prescription medications. Let's talk about stress. Stress is bad for the immune system. We all kind of know that. That's not a big surprise. But basically, what happens is when you're under high levels of stress, your body makes a ton of extra cortisol, which is your body's primary stress hormone, and that directly suppresses the immune system. If you're familiar with prednisone, this is basically a prescription version of cortisol, and we take this as an anti-inflammatory to suppress the immune system, which is good if your immune system is trying to attack you. But long-term prednisone use can be extremely dangerous. And this is basically the same reason why high levels of stress chronically can be extremely dangerous as well. It's also, as most of you probably know, affects your sleep too, which affects your immune system indirectly. And stress has been shown in studies to weaken the function of natural killer cells. You produce less cytokines. Cytokines are the basically messenger molecules that the immune system uses, and you get an inhibition of the inflammatory response, and you make less white blood cells. I've actually seen many clients of mine who kind of run with not a clinically significant low white blood cell count, like just below the normal line. And we kind of do a full workup, and the only thing that we can find out is that it's probably their stress levels. What do we do about stress? Sometimes that's easier said than done because we can't always exactly get rid of our stress. There's no magical pill for that, unfortunately. I usually really encourage people to look into heart rate variability training. Heart Math is a company that they give you a lot of tools. They have a fantastic app, a website. You can actually buy heart rate variability monitors from them, and they will do full training with you. And basically, the idea here is that if you can affect the heart rate through these different exercises, you kind of through the vagus nerve can affect your actual psychological state. And so you can actually get a big reduction in anxiety and depression. I've clinically seen this to be super effective, and the research behind it is really fantastic. Um, counseling is super awesome. Again, my clinical experience with it, fantastic. And in the research, it's very clear that counseling can be very effective. The hard part about counseling is really finding a good match. So I'm always encouraging people try to kind of find a good counselor before things fall apart too much. Oftentimes that's a little easier said than done, but really can't speak highly enough of that. Some of the basic stuff for stress levels is just eating a clean diet, focusing on sleep and exercise. Those can be really helpful also. And if you really feel like the marker that I use to tell people, hey, it's time to do something about this, is if your stress is affecting your quality of life and your activities of daily living, like getting up and going to work and whatnot, on a more often than not basis, that's the time to do something about it. And I think a lot of times people go way beyond that point before they recognize, oh, I probably need to get this addressed. Let's talk about food. Okay, so if you were going to force me to pick a lifestyle factor that played the biggest role in immune system health, I would pick food, although they are all very, very important. But by a landslide, I think food is probably the most important. So I'm going to clarify here in a minute kind of what I mean by a good diet. But just in general, healthy diets have been shown to reduce CRP levels. This is a marker of inflammation. And when that CRP level is elevated, your immune system is kind of gone hog wild in some direction. And so kind of balancing those levels out can really improve immune function. Dietary antioxidants can reduce oxidative stress and enhance the body's ability to fight infection. Antioxidants, I usually tell people if the food stains you, think of like a berry or a beet or spinach or kale when it's all ground up. If it stains you, it's probably really high in antioxidants and super healthy for you. Food can positively shift the gut microbiome, and this can happen in as little as 48 hours, which is really impressive. And it's been shown in some clinical studies to improve response to vaccination. The key takeaways is that food has the power to reduce inflammation, enhance antioxidant defense, improve the gut health, and balance out the immune system overall. Okay, so most of the research I just referenced was primarily done on the Mediterranean diet. This is one of the best studied diets with numerous health benefits. And if you kind of look at this pyramid, I think it does a decent job of summarizing this. It's essentially taking your kind of standard American diet and kind of flipping it on its head. So lots of fruits and veggies, proteins, kind of emphasis coming from plants. That's primarily the legume family. And then some plant fats in there, some seafood, some of your leaner unprocessed meats, and then kind of a really cutting back on the red meat, the dairy, and the sweets. Um, Lots of unprocessed foods. This diet has a really low glycemic impact. It has a lot of fiber, a lot of healthy fats. And I just always want to know, like the grains are on here, right? So you're basically, if you take those two bottom rungs of the pyramid, you've got legumes, grains, fruits, and vegetables. That basically should make up the core of your diet. Now, the grains always have to be unprocessed. So processed grains are super inflammatory, right? So we're talking about like Twinkies and Doritos, right? Those are all grain foods, but they're all highly processed. So we're talking here about oatmeal and brown rice and quinoa and those types of things. This is just a list of some of the benefits of the Mediterranean diet. Keep in mind, this is a very short list. The benefits are much more than I can fit into one slide. And this is a really well-studied way of eating. You get an improved cholesterol panel, improved blood sugar markers, improved blood pressure, weight loss, decreased inflammatory markers, which can improve your immune system function. You get improved glutathione levels. Now, glutathione is your body's primary antioxidant, and so decreased glutathione levels actually makes your immune system, kind of taxes your immune system, so it doesn't work as well. And you get a big reduction in cancer risk. I've seen this way of eating both in research and in my clinic do pretty awesome stuff. I've seen people kind of drive a variety of chronic diseases, diabetes, blood pressure, fatty liver disease, autoimmune conditions into complete remission, which is really fantastic to do with just food alone. And while this is a very effective way to manage a lot of chronic diseases, the thing that I see keeps people eating this way is how they feel. If I can get people doing this for a couple months, they'll come in and tell me they have more energy, they're sleeping better, they have less joint pain, their hormones are finally balancing out, and they just have less stress overall. This is truly an anti-inflammatory diet. It's kind of a fire hose to put out the fire caused by chronic inflammation. Here's just a 2024 study kind of directly describing how the Mediterranean diet improves immune function in older adults. It's probably mostly through the effect on the gut microbiome, which is no surprise, but interesting read nonetheless. These are some nutrition resources. These are some really good books to kind of go over the science behind why this style of eating is so helpful. So if you want to kind of geek out on the food stuff and the science part, read the book. And if you just want to eat the food, check out some of these cookbooks. I believe all these are available through the library. So let's talk about the gut microbiome. This is an exciting area, kind of up and coming in research. You're going to be hearing a lot about the gut microbiome if you haven't already over the next decade or two. The gut microbiome is really a key part of the immune system. It's kind of considered one of our first line defenses against infection. And this is just a population of bacteria, some yeast, that live naturally on the GI tract. And as we age, as we kind of mentioned earlier, the gut microbiome tends to shift, and this can negatively affect the immune system. We see those two things again, kind of a decrease in biodiversity and a general shift towards more inflammatory species. So, what do we do about it? How can we support it? These are the key principles to supporting a healthy microbiome as we age. Fiber is number one because I believe it is the most important. Fiber is the food for the microbiome. So you cannot expect to have a healthy, robust microbiome unless you are feeding them. The daily recommended amounts are between 30, 40 grams per day. So I'd really recommend that you just check the math. Couple days, figure out how much fiber you're getting. Either read the back of labels or get one of those food apps that will help you track that through your cell phone. MyFitnessPal and then Chronometer are two that I commonly recommend. Polyphenols and antioxidants, again, those are kind of foods that naturally stain you. Mediterranean diet is just full of these, and numerous studies to show that these support the growth of beneficial bacteria. Antibiotics, super useful drugs, saving people's lives for long time. However, they are overly used. We have been abusing them for a long time. And so I just recommend only take them unless they're absolutely necessary because they kill bacteria, not just the bad ones, but the good ones too. And so every time you take a round of antibiotics, it totally wipes out your microbiome, which can be a big, big problem. Inflammatory foods, so highly processed foods, really rich foods, fast foods, basically any just heavily processed foods going to really shift the microbiome to a more inflammatory population and be a problem. Here's alcohol showing up again. It is not been shown to really be safe in any amount in adults or in humans, sorry. It's associated with a high cancer rate kind of across the board. And so I really recommend drinking it rarely or just not at all. And it's not only toxic to us, but it's also toxic to the gut microbiome. It can kind of do the same thing where it decreases that biodiversity and shifts the population in a direction you don't want it to go in. Time restricted eating. So your bowels and your microbiome need a break from digesting food all day long. And so I always recommend trying to make sure that you're getting a nightly fast of a minimum of 12 hours. It actually, metabolically speaking, it takes a lot of energy to break down food. So if we're eating food for, 16, 18 hours a day, your GI tract and your body's just not getting much of a break from that. And so just kind of tracking, make sure if you start eating at 7 that you're done eating by 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., basically. So that kind of 12-hour eating window. These are some supplements that have been shown to help improve the microbiome health. Probiotics, those are pretty basic, right? These are shelf-stable encapsulations of beneficial bacteria. I always equate this to gardening. This is basically the equivalent of putting seeds in your garden, right? We're seeding out the microbiome with beneficial strains. I usually recommend blends of lactobacillus and bifidobacteria, numerous studies to show that these can improve the function of the immune system. Another really common recommendation is arabinogalactin powder. This is the inner bark of the larch tree. It actually has been shown in some research to reduce GI inflammation and improve the beneficial bacteria population. And you can just get it in powder form. Digestive enzymes. So it's pretty common as we age, especially if we're under high levels of stress, to produce less digestive enzymes. So these are the things that your GI tract makes to break down food. And so if you're not making enough of them, you're not adequately breaking down foods. You basically have a bunch of undigested food that's dumping into your GI tract, and this can be pretty inflammatory for your gut microbiome. And so you can actually take digestive enzymes with your meals to help you break down food. There is a test, you can actually get your digestive enzyme levels tested, stool test called pancreatic elastase. I oftentimes will skip ordering the test because insurance companies don't always want to pay for it and it can get kind of spendy. And I'll have people just do a trial where they do digestive enzymes for a couple of weeks and see if that kind of helps their GI symptoms. L-glutamine powder, this is pretty common stuff. This is an amino acid. Is one of the primary foods for the enterocytes. Those are the cells that line the GI tract. And it's been shown in a few studies that supplementing with L-glutamine can actually increase the production of secretory IgA. This is one of the primary antibodies that your immune system uses in your GI tract. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about fiber. I'm always kind of picking people's brains. What is fiber? Where do we get fiber? And most of the time, people don't really know. And so I think this is an important thing to review. So fiber, simply put, it's the stuff that we don't absorb. Kind of goes in one hole and out the other. So for a long time, I think we thought it was not very important stuff. And then the research started coming out to show that it was actually a lot more important than we thought. So this is a quote from T. Colin Campbell. I love this. I think this does a fantastic job summarizing fiber. It says fiber represents hundreds of substances and its benefits operate through an exceptionally complex series of biochemical and physiological events. That basically sums it up. And are we getting enough fiber? Not even close. Most of the time when I have people go home and do the math for me, they're coming back with 5, 8, maybe 10 grams of fiber per day, when you really need, quite a bit more than that. And so if you're roughly trying to aim for 30, that's about 10 grams per meal. So that's roughly easy to remember. So I usually just tell people every time you eat a meal, check the rough fiber content and see if you're getting anywhere near 10. These are some of the health benefits of eating more fiber. You get improved satiety. It makes you feel full longer. It doesn't get absorbed, so it stays in your GI tract the whole way through. This is actually one of the best ways to upregulate endogenous GLP-1. So this is the GLP-1 agonist, those weight loss shots. They've gotten really popular. I'm sure you've all heard about them. Ozempic, Wegovy, tirzepatide, Mounjaro, all of those. So all of those are giving you GLP-1 from the outside, right? We're adding it into the system. You can actually make more of it yourself just by eating higher fiber foods. It's one of the best ways to upregulate those levels naturally. Um, Eating high fiber has been shown to improve cardiovascular and metabolic health, like by a landslide. Also can really help with hormone health. But again, this is really big for immune system health by directly modulating the gut microbiome. Okay, where do we get fiber? When I ask people this, most often I hear fruits, vegetables, and salad. Which is true. There are fiber in fruits, vegetables, and salad, but just not that much. An orange has 2 grams, an apple 4, celery 2, broccoli 4 grams per serving, right? So if we're trying to get to 30, 40 grams per day through fruits and vegetables, you can do it, but you're going to have to eat an awful lot of them, upwards of 15 servings. I love my fruits and vegetables, but I'm not going to eat 15 servings of them a day. Most of our higher fiber foods are going to be things like whole grains and legumes. So again, always on processed grains, quinoa, brown rice, oatmeal, wild rice, black rice, red rice, whatever one you can find that you enjoy. And then the legume family, that's going to be beans, split peas, lentils. These can have upwards of 10 to 15 grams of fiber per day. And I think that in there's a Blue Zone documentary. I haven't actually watched it, but from the people I've talked to who have watched it, I think that was a Netflix thing. These populations of people that lived to be really long, long, healthy lives, very little chronic disease. They were mostly subsisting on these types of foods. I always ask people, how do you eat beans? How do you get beans in your diet? The two things I always hear are baked beans and chili. Now, baked beans, a ton of added sugar mostly, so not a super health food in my opinion. And then chili, usually people are adding a ton of animal fat and animal protein to that, which again isn't necessarily bad. It's just a kind of a frequency thing. And so I really recommend this food. I guess the food blogger you would call her. She's got a really great website and she has a really good cooking book that the library has. And she does a fantastic job of teaching people to eat more legumes and how to add them into their diet in much more creative ways. This is just a really good study, a little older, but really good study, kind of just reviewing how fiber affects the immune system. And again, this is likely through modulation of that gut microbiome. And I think that we're kind of at the tip of the iceberg. We're just beginning to kind of come to understand how important that microbiome is for the immune system and overall health. I just want to do a quick plug for green tea. The research around green tea is fantastic. It has by multiple methods, it modulates the immune system in a benefit way, which is really awesome. You see a reduction in a lot of cancers. You can see upwards of a 30% reduction in breast cancer risk with green tea consumption, which is just phenomenal. A lot of metabolic health improvements, and then just reduction in cognitive decline and dementia type presentations. And this is not a hard thing to do. I mean, adding green tea to your diet is super simple. I like to put it in my water bottle every day. I fill it up. I throw a couple of bags of green tea in there. You can do it iced. You can do it hot. It can go in smoothies. You can add a slice of lemon to it. It's just a really simple health promoting addition. Let's talk about exercise. We all know we should be exercising. The fact that it's healthy for us isn't really a surprise. The key is really doing it and making it a habit. But it's been shown to affect the immune system in a variety of ways. It has directly anti-inflammatory benefits, which is awesome. It improves those natural killer cells that we talked about earlier. They work better. It can improve vaccine responses, which is pretty awesome, and it can support a healthy microbiome. And it improves circulation, and immune cells travel through the body through your circulatory system, so that can be really beneficial. The other thing that exercise really does that I don't get enough attention is it improves your mood, just makes you feel better, and that's pretty awesome. We could all use a little bit of that, especially coming out of winter right now. So these are just some tips that I have for exercise. Again, it's really making it a habit. And so I always tell people, if you're not currently on a really good exercise routine, pick a really small goal, because it's not really hard to stay on that bandwagon once you're on it, because you start feeling so good. The hard part is about getting on it. And so I usually just tell people small goals, 15, 30 minutes a day. I really like walking. You don't need gear for that. You don't need a gym membership. I mean, maybe it's Washington, right? Maybe a raincoat and some rain boots. But you can just do that straight out your front door. Set a timer, walk for 15 minutes. When it goes off, turn around and walk back home. Really strong research on walking. It's ideal to combine cardio exercise with strength training. The YMCA here in town has just awesome exercise classes for all ages, tons of strength training stuff. So if you're more of a gym type person, the YMCA is highly recommended in my opinion. You can also find a lot of really great, short 15-minute strength training exercises on YouTube. And again, the key is to make it a habit. So you kind of got to force yourself to do it for a little bit. And then once you get used to doing it, the way you feel usually keeps you going. Let's talk about some nutrients in the immune system. Vitamin D. So vitamin D, this is another one where I kind of feel like it's the tip of the iceberg situation. We know it's important. We know it plays a role in a whole bunch of different things, but we don't quite fully yet understand it. But we know that it's a key player in the health of the immune system. My typical recommendation is usually to try to get your lab vitamin D levels up around 60, or at least as close to 60 as you can get it. The dosing on vitamin D is pretty wide, so I recommend, trying to address that with your healthcare provider based on your lab work. You can cause vitamin D toxicity. I have seen some people, I found it on the internet somewhere that they should take 20,000 IUs per day for the rest of their life. That's a whopping high vitamin D dosage, and you can cause some pretty serious calcification side effects with that. So just proceed with caution. It's a very important nutrient. Most people in our area need to take it. I think that if you look at us on a globe, we're kind of sitting right next to Alaska. So we just really don't get as much sun as we need to have good vitamin D levels here. B vitamins, of all of them, they all play a key role in modulating the immune system. I find these are low in people all the time. Now you can get labs for each individual B vitamin. Super spendy though. Insurance doesn't tend to want to cover that. With the exception maybe of B12, but B6 and 2 and 1 and all the other ones they don't really tend to want to pay for. There's a much cheaper lab called homocysteine, and if you can get those levels under 7, you're usually doing a pretty good job with B vitamins. And it's really easy to supplement B vitamins. You just take a complex. So if you can get that lab check, that can be really beneficial. Omega-3 fatty acids, the research on these are just blowing up. Really awesome studies to show omega-3 fatty acids benefit the immune system from a variety of different angles. Basically what we have is the cell membranes are packed with fatty acids, and they're packed with 6s and 3s. 6s tend to cause inflammation, 3s tend to calm them down. And so if you have in your lab value, which I find more commonly than not, people have really high 6 levels and really low 3 levels. And so basically what that means is their cells are primed for inflammation. So they have a lot of 6s, so they can cause inflammation all day long, but they don't have the 3s that they need to calm it down. And so you get this dysregulated inflammatory response. Really, really good research around immune health, heart health, and cognitive decline prevention. There's a relatively cheap lab. Most insurance carriers will cover it. It's a red blood cell omega-3 index, and you really want that lab to be between 6 and 8%. Magnesium. We talked about this a little while ago, I think in the sleep section. This is the most common micronutrient deficiency in the population. Not really good lab tests for it outside of clinical uses. It's also a relatively safe nutrient. So again, it's in an earlier slide, but chelated forms are best. Those are going to get really high absorption. The citrate and oxide forms are more of a laxative use. These are a couple of supplements. There's just so many different botanical medicine and nutrient supplements out there that you can use to support the immune system. So these are just a handful of them. NAC, N-acetylcysteine. This is an amino acid. It is the rate-limiting step for glutathione production. Just once again, glutathione is your body's primary antioxidant, and so that can really help your immune system out. It also thins mucus. So any of your kind of thick mucousy presentations like chronic sinusitis, asthma, pneumonia, bronchitis, this can really help thin that mucus cells out, support that antioxidant protection. And since it's amino acid, it's pretty safe stuff. And this is a really common dose here, the 600 to 900 milligrams 2 times a day. Quercetin, this is a flavonoid found in a lot of plant foods. It kind of helps modulate that histamine response. So seasonal allergies, this is really commonly used for. I've started using it a lot for kind of colds and flus because I see that a lot of people they'll get a cold and flu and they kind of start to get better, and then they almost transition into this respiratory inflammation picture. And I think that has a lot to do with a histamine imbalance. So this is a really common dosage used right here, 500 to 1,000 milligrams twice a day. Vitamin C and antioxidants, these just in general help fight oxidative stress. It's a really wide dosage range here on vitamin C and a variety of different antioxidants. I usually recommend people get these to your diet. It is really hard to get high quality antioxidants. It's just really hard to supplement away good food choices. And so the smoothie I'll show you guys here in a moment is kind of one of the best ways I try to really just boost antioxidant levels in people. Elderberry syrup, you may have heard of this. This has gotten to be really popular stuff. It can kind of help prevent colds and flus and help reduce the severity and duration. It's really good for kids. Again, it's really wide dosage range. It's an extract of a berry, so it's pretty safe unless you're eating the berry directly. So the extract is safe, the berry itself. So if you have elderberry, I have a bunch of those growing on my property, the seed can be kind of toxic. So if you're ever trying to make it yourself, just make sure that you follow some wise instructions on how to make sure that seed doesn't end up in your final product. This last one here, Saccharomyces boulardii. This is a kind of an up and coming probiotic. It's actually technically a yeast, and it's been shown in quite a few studies to improve immune function, again, likely through modulation of the gut microbiome. It's got a pretty wide dosage range on that one too, so I usually let the manufacturer of those particular products make dosing recommendations on that. Okay, so this is a smoothie I have people start all the time. I feel like we're a little premature in making this recommendation. I usually try to really start pushing this once the sun comes out and people are okay with drinking something cold. It's pretty cold today, so I don't know if this is going to sound terribly appetizing today. However, this is a really awesome, quick, fast way to boost antioxidant and omega levels. So greens are going to be just greens like kale and spinach and chard, those darker leafy greens. Those are really, really high in a lot of those antioxidants and polyphenols. They are superfoods by a landslide. Costco sells these big bags of power greens. They're like $6 or $7. They store in the freezer very well. So we buy them, we bring them home, we throw them straight in the freezer, and then when we make a smoothie, we just grab a handful out and add it to the blender. Same thing with berries. Again, right? Foods that stain you, really rich in antioxidants, and they store well in the freezer, and they're actually fantastically cheaper if you buy them frozen as well. And they just go straight into the smoothie, very simple. Flax seeds. Flax seeds are high in both omega-3s and fiber. So fantastic foods, really cheap stuff. 2 tablespoons of them, whole or ground, is going to give you, I want to say, 6 or 7 grams of fiber and maybe 4,000 milligrams of omega-3s. So pretty impressive stuff. And then look, there's that green tea. You can get that green tea addition in there as well. You just blend it up and drink it. Pretty straightforward. Doesn't take a long time. All that stuff can be, bought in ahead of time, so you can have a month worth of smoothies just ready to go, and they travel well also. This is just some basic immune system stuff. Wash your hands a lot and avoid touching your face. This sounds really simple to do, but actually not touching your face is pretty challenging. Kids obviously are notoriously bad at this, but adults aren't very good at it either. This is the big one, the second point here. If you're a higher risk individual, if you're over the age of 16, you have chronic conditions, you need to be more cautious. Your immune system is more susceptible, and just being really cautious around crowds and large public gatherings during peak influenza season. You can actually track this through the county's website. They'll tell you where we're at with influenza A and B, and whether or not those are really, really spiked. We just recently kind of came off of a really high influenza A spike. So I was really encouraging people during that time, hey, if you're higher risk, this is a good time to somewhat isolate. Um, Kids spread viruses like wildfire. So if you have kids, obviously you can't avoid them. They're there with you. However, I just encourage people to kind of keep this in mind during cold and flu season. Our great grandma is 94 years old, and so we kind of go a month or two here or there with just not really seeing her a whole lot because our kids are exposed to all sorts of different things, and it's kind of hard to keep those colds and flus away from the elderly population. So just kind of having some caution around that. Um, the pendulum can definitely swing too far in the opposite direction. I've met some people that, are still sort of living on lockdown mode. And we got some pretty serious decline in mental health during this time. So just, the pendulum swings both ways. So just kind of keeping that in mind. That's really all I have for you guys today. I hope that was helpful. My intention with improving people's health is never to really live forever. That's not really ever the goal, right? That's not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is improve our quality of life right now. Because if you feel good when you wake up in the morning and you have good energy through the day and your immune system is more robust, your quality of life is going to improve, which is to me that's the biggest and most important thing. So we can take some questions now.
Hi, I've got a question.
Mm-hmm.
What role does protein play? Because I found that I need to have pretty high levels of protein. I had kind of low protein for a while. It's like I started paying attention to that.
Yeah, so protein actually becomes really important as we age. This is in order to prevent muscular atrophy, right? So the muscles kind of going down. Protein is also really important for the immune system. I mean, it's the building blocks of life, right? So if we talk about the macrophages or the T cells or any of your white blood cells, you need protein to make more cells, and so that becomes really important. And as we age, the protein RDAs, in my opinion, at least go up quite a bit. And so they're a little bit lower when you're younger and a little bit higher when you're older. The other thing that I see happen a lot is that as we age, just the drive to eat food isn't really as strong. And so I see a lot of women in particular who will kind of just without really noticing it start eating less frequently and eating less food overall. And so protein can become very deficient very easily. I really like protein shakes or protein powders. You can actually buy pea protein powder in bulk, and it's super, super cheap. You don't have to get a fancy protein powder by any measure, just plain old pea protein. It can actually be added into that smoothie that I had just shown you. But that's a really easy way to get more protein in your diet because it's just like clockwork 3 times a day. You just have a little bit of protein powder in a coffee or in a smoothie or add it into a soup. So those are really easy ways to get that level increased. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay.
And I will have to say though, I've tried the pea protein and my system doesn't handle it at all. I've had to
Yeah.
do the whey
The
protein.
whey, yeah, I was going to say whey is another option for that too. Yeah. I think sometimes it matters how the protein gets into water is key, right? You got to have a lot of water when you have a protein powder. I see a lot of people kind of get that one a little off where they're having their protein powder and then not drinking any extra water with it. And that's just going to sit. It's going to sit in your GI tract, pull water out of you, right? The water's got to come from somewhere. So that's just another really important thing too, is make sure the water intake is pretty adequate.
We had a question show up in the chat.
Yeah.
Is it true that catching viruses improves your immune system over time?
So yes, to a degree. Now, when we're kids, there's definitely something to be said. There was like a movie about this, right, where a kid lived in a bubble, I think. And that can actually be a problem. And they've actually got some research out that letting kids play outside, like letting them play in the dirt and stuff like that, can actually improve their immune system. And kind of overly sanitizing, like hyper sanitizing everything, can lead to more immune system and autoimmune dysfunction. So there is some truth in that. Now, I would say that's more specific to pediatric populations. I think as we age, the benefit of catching multiple viruses goes away and probably causes more inflammatory damage than anything else. Okay, so I've heard that when insulin is continuously running in our system, we can't lose weight. Is this really true or just fluff? I'm not diabetic, but snack a lot. This is definitely true. Fasting insulin is a lab you can get that will basically show you whether or not you have insulin resistance, like up to 10 years before you ever become pre-diabetic. You really want those fasting insulin levels to be below 7. So if you haven't had that checked, you can consider that. I actually find this to be a really common problem with women, especially as women get towards peri and then post-menopause, where they'll be eating low calorie. I mean, I've seen women push their caloric intake down to 1,000 calories a day and they're still not losing weight. And then we kind of do a little bit of extra research and find out, well, their insulin levels are running high all day long. And what insulin does is it blocks lipolysis, which is burning of fat. So you won't burn fat if your insulin levels are running high throughout the day. So this is one of the ways to address this is that kind of time restricted eating that we had mentioned, I think back in the microbiome slide, where you just make sure that you're getting at least that 12-hour fast during the day. There are some benefits to doing longer fasting, right? There's some benefits there. You kind of have to balance out nutrient needs, especially as you age. So that's kind of a more in-depth question that kind of is more case specific. But yeah, definitely insulin can be a huge problem with losing weight.
Darlene, you're raising your hand. You want to go ahead and share your question?
Yes, well, thank you for a very stimulating presentation. It's really important to, if you can afford it, to buy certified organic foods.
Yes.
There are so many toxics in the commercial foods and the way they're grown that are causing diseases and even deaths. So if anyone can afford to supplement their diet or with certified organic foods or total certified organic foods, do so.
Yeah, so there's a company called Azure. It's Azure. Oh, it's called Azure Standard. And they do bulk. You can order food from them in bulk, and they do a really good job of connecting people with organic and well produced food through much cheaper prices than, say shopping at a local health food store. It's also kind of catching on. So you're getting some of your bigger stores that are doing a better job of carrying more organic products, which is really nice. The pesticides and herbicides in conventional farming are very toxic to the mitochondria. That's kind of the engine of the cell. And so when you're dumping in toxins every day that are hurting your mitochondria, your entire body takes a hit, the immune system included. And that's a big problem. One of the highest ways to get in a lot of pesticides and herbicides is heavily processed foods. So even just getting yourself on more of a whole foods diet can actually reduce your exposure to pesticides and toxins quite a bit, because a lot of those heavily processed foods kind of inadvertently are kind of concentrating those problematic foods, or I'm sorry, problematic toxins. Yeah, good point.
Well, we have a lot of farmers, organic farmers in our area, and supporting them, getting it fresh,
Hmm.
is very helpful. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if we have any of those. I think there's CSAs, they're called, community supported
Yes,
agriculture.
yeah,
Yeah, I
they
don't
do
know if we
both
have
those.
any of those in this area. When I lived in Tacoma, those were really popular. And so it was a weekly flat rate, 25 or $35, and they brought you a box of whatever was in season
Mhm.
from their farm, which was definitely a little bit of a learning curve because what's in season locally here is not what you're kind of used to buying at the grocery store when you go to the produce section. I ate a lot of turnips and parsnips and rutabagas, and those were vegetables that were totally new to me. So that's, yeah, but those CSA programs are really, really awesome.
Evelyn, you have your hand up.
I was going to mention the local farmers. You can contact, there are several of them that come weekly or once or twice a month into the farmers market. Wild Edge Farm is one. River Run, Djembe Farms. I believe all three of those have CSAs. I'm sure there's others.
That's great. Thank you for that.
I have to go over there and get it.
Oh yeah, it looks like somebody shared a link to kind of looks like an online resource for finding local CSAs in your area. So that's really nice.
I'm excited to see Suzanne's comment that Azure Standard drops off in the JCPenney parking lot every other week. Because I think
Yeah.
I've seen that happen, and I've often wondered what is happening there.
It's
So
a pretty intense experience because it's big pallets full of food and then they separate it all out and it's kind of a frenzy. There's like a frenzy when it happens. It's an event for sure. And they come to Port Angeles too, so they do Swim and Port Angeles, both of them.
any other questions or thoughts, comments?
Oh, animal diet versus plant diet. Oof, that's a hot topic. I definitely have seen the research on plant-based diets really impress me. Dr. Esselstyn in particular, he has shown that he has been able to reverse coronary artery calcification with the whole foods plant-based diet, which is, in conventional medicine, we don't really have a way to address that except for putting people on, statins and other cardiovascular medication. So I'm really, really impressed by that. Tough sell though, real hard time selling that to people, and that's the part I've really struggled with is just getting people to kind of open up to the idea of that. I have gotten a handful of people just to try it for 2 weeks, so that's what I would encourage if you're open to it. Try it for 2 weeks. It's not nearly as hard as it sounds, or nearly as boring. Oh, we got it backwards. Okay. So yeah, I have seen I've seen the research on the whole foods plant-based thing work really well. I've seen it in clinical practice work really well. Definitely there's a fine line there because the word vegan can mean a lot of different things. You can get a bag of Doritos that's vegan. Technically, a soda is vegan, but not healthy foods, right? So kind of some modification there for sure. I've seen the carnivore diet work short term for weight loss. So that's definitely an option for people. I have, however, also seen it do things to cardiometabolic markers that terrify me. So I never clinically recommend it. I've seen a lot of people use it short term for weight loss. I have not seen it done well long term. Okay, so I've used keto only to lose fat. Yeah, so keto's basically a way to lose fat. So one of the books I had referenced up there, Longevity Diet, that's a researcher by the name of Dr. Walter Longo. He's done a lot of work with kind of more of a, I guess technically it would be pescatarian because you can eat fish on his diet. A lot of work around that, but he's actually designed something called a fasting mimicking diet, and he's using that to treat a lot of types of cancers, which is pretty exciting. So it's kind of a plant-based keto diet, which is really interesting. So his research is pretty cool. He just put out a new book last month summarizing a lot of that. So I'm kind of excited to see what more comes out with his studies. That's my big concern. Okay, so the other thing I've seen the carnivore diet do that's concerning to me. So animal foods have zero fiber, right? No fiber. So nothing that's going to feed your microbiome. So that's I haven't seen that tracked well yet, kind of in research studies. So I have encouraged a handful of my patients who have been on the carnivore diet for more than 9 months if they'd be willing to do some stool testing for me, because I'm just kind of really curious to see what's going to happen to microbiome markers by kind of staying off fiber for a long time. Do you think it's important to get an oxidized L? Yeah, so I always recommend your standard cholesterol panel is super important. It's also cheap and your insurance is going to cover it. But yeah, those more advanced cardiometabolic lab testing, oxidized LDL, ApoB, LP little a, those are all really awesome labs. There is a lab company called Doctor's Data. They have an entire kit that kind of does that, all of those advanced cardiometabolic labs in one, which is kind of nice. I want to say they're charging 200 or 250, which for what it is, it's pretty cheap, because if you try to order those labs through a conventional lab, you're going to be running thousands very quickly. So yeah, I do think that those, because basically if your LDL is high, if it's the big and fluffy and non-inflammatory type, you're going to have a lot less problems. If it's the small, inflamed, oxidized LDL, much more problematic, much more likely to slip underneath those endothelial cells and create plaques and cause inflammation in the blood vessels. Yeah, so definitely, just Suzanne, your comment there, definitely, if you're eating an animal diet, but you have a lot more, variety in there, a lot of veggies and stuff coming in, I think that's definitely beneficial. My only, comment there is just the fibers. It's really hard. I find people really struggle to hit their fiber RDA if they're avoiding, not necessarily grains, because you can avoid grains and still get your fiber RDA up there, but basically avoiding carbohydrates, right? Because your high carb foods like the grains and like legumes are the things that are high in fiber. It's really hard to hit those fiber RDA without those two food groups. Kefir is a great probiotic. It's a little hard to handle the flavors. Yeah, these are acquired tastes for sure, right? Kimchi, that's not everybody's cup of tea. Kombucha, again, also the flavors, right? So you don't necessarily have to get fermented foods to get those probiotics. You can just take them in a capsule form. That might be easier for you. But there's a lot of different fermented foods out there. So I always just recommend people just try a lot of different things. Yeah, so kefir, somebody mentioned above, kombucha, kimchi. You can actually get a lot of pickled veggies that are raw. So raw pickled veggies, I believe Country Air sells quite a few of those. Oh, and Sunny Farms, where you can basically just eat pickles that are technically fermented in a probiotic. So that's a little bit, they're much more expensive than, regular pickles, but they definitely have a lot of those probiotics in them. And a lot of this stuff you can do at home. So I think Swain's has like a home fermentation kit, so you can kind of learn to ferment these things on your own. Oh, sauerkraut, that's another fermented food. Really easy to make at home, super cheap.
Wow, I have learned so much today, and I can't wait to go back and watch this recording with my notebook and pen.
Oh, Betsy's Pickles here in PA does fermented pickles. Fantastic. There you go. Local resource for you. Thank you, Evelyn.
Nice. I'm going to go ahead and reshare my screen. And we'll talk a little bit about what is coming up. But first of all, thank you, Dr. Panza, for
You're
this
welcome.
amazing presentation. So much information. I feel equipped to do better. So thank you very much. Our next Aging Well program will take place here on Zoom again at 11 a.m. on Tuesday, May 20th. On that program, we will be learning about the services and volunteer opportunities available through Olympic Community Action Programs, commonly known as OLICAP. We will have Robin Pangborn, who is one of the managers, and Holly Morgan, who is the executive director, with us to give an overview of OLICAP, including their older adult focused programs and volunteer opportunities. So I look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you again to Dr. Panza for joining us today. Thanks to all
You're
of you
welcome.
for
Thank you.
being here, and everyone take care, and we will see you next time.